If you struggle with EQ, like most of us do, don't worry, I get it. It's one of the hardest things, if not the hardest thing in mixing, in my opinion. I'm going to show you one thing that you might be doing that's actually harming you. And if you make this one little quality of life switch, it might actually make your EQing a lot easier and your mixes sound much better. Just check it out. Yo, what's good, guys? Inswain with Inswain Audio. Welcome back to the channel. If you're new, subscribe and stick around because I drop videos like this every single day. You're not going to want to miss them. Straight gems, I'm telling you. Anyways, let's get right into it. Today, I'm going to show you a little trick that you can do on most of your parametric EQs. If you use FabFilter EQ, which most of you probably do, this applies, and it applies to other parametric EQs as well. So if your EQ looks something like this, there might be an issue going on with how you have your plugin set up. Hear me out. So you can see these cuts. They look relatively extreme, but not too crazy, right? But if you actually look, this is a 15 dB cut at 270. Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you you're never going to cut 15 dBs, but let's be realistic. Most of the time, you're not doing that. So it's totally possible, it's needed, and it can sound good. Most of the time, that's not the reality. And then we have another 9 dBs cut here, 6 dBs here, almost 11 dBs here, right? You get the picture. This is extreme EQing, which once again, sometimes we need to do. I'm not saying that that's inherently the issue, but if you always find yourself and your EQ looks like this, you might actually be making massive cuts and you aren't realizing it. And this has to do with how we have our EQ scaled and how our eyes, our visuals play tricks on us. So when we look at it like this, right, this is only dragged down, not even it's like a third of the way down. This here is not even halfway down. So when we see that it's like, oh, we didn't drag it down that much, we think that not that much change is happening to the audio because our eyes are playing tricks on what we hear. But in reality, we're cutting 11 dBs. That's a massive change in the audio. But because of the way we have this EQ scaled, it doesn't look like we're doing a massive cut. That's because we're on the 30 decibel scale. If we change the scale to 12, now it looks massive. The EQ didn't change, just how we're viewing it changed. But I'd be willing to bet that if we listened, we would think it sounded different like this as opposed to this. We would think this version right here is more of a drastic change than this one, just because of what our eyes are seeing. Now, obviously, we know this isn't the case, and you could test this. It's true, it's not any different, but the way that it looks is tricking our ears into hearing it differently. So this is where the trick comes in. If you find yourself EQing like this and over EQing, what you can do is change the scaling of your EQ to like maybe 12 or 6 dBs. Look at how extreme this looks, right? Once again, it's the same thing. So if you find yourself over EQing, use it to your advantage to trick your eyes to make smaller moves that look like they're bigger. Now, at the end of the day, the right EQ move is the right EQ move. It doesn't matter what it looks like, what scaling you're on. But my point is maybe the visuals are tricking you, so, flip that on its head. So what I like to use personally is the 6 dBs. I used to use the 30 dBs and I would be over EQing because my eyes are tricking me. If I use the 6 dBs, right, let's kind of make the EQ look like it did before, right? Something like this, right? The cuts were approximately this big. So if you're EQing and you're doing these moves and you start to see that this dip's cutting down a lot or this boost is up here, you're starting to think like, okay, it's pretty extreme. Like maybe I should stop because of what I'm seeing. But in reality, this is only a 3 dB cut. These are 3 dBs, but they look massive. So this is going to make you a little bit more scared to go extreme, which can be a bad thing, don't get me wrong. But if you find yourself over EQing, this might be a good thing because your eyes are trained one way. So when you start to see this is where you start to get in the extreme territories. Look, we're only at 5 dBs of a boost right here. Whereas if we go to 30 dBs, look at how small these are. It's almost like you barely even moved it and we're already at 5 dBs, right? With all that being said, if you find yourself over EQing, and it doesn't have to be with just this EQ, there's other EQs you can, rescale. If you find yourself over EQing, try to use a smaller scale so that the trick that our eyes inevitably play on us, we use to our advantage and we don't overdo it. And I guess conversely, if you find yourself under EQing, you could use a more zoomed out scale so that you make bigger moves. So that's a little trick where if you find yourself kind of struggling, this might help it. Like I said, though, at the end of the day, the EQ move is the EQ move. It's going to sound how it sounds regardless of what it looks like. And this really only applies to parametric EQs because other EQs you can't really scale and you don't have as much visual information. But let's be honest, a lot of us are using these types of EQs, particularly this one, a lot. I know the Pro Q4 just came out. I'm getting that soon, probably today, but for now, we're still ancient, but the concept still applies. Use the scaling to your advantage to not let your eyes play tricks on you because inevitably they're going to, As humans, we rely on our vision so heavily, and it's going to influence what we hear. Even if you're aware of this and you're a professional mix engineer, there's nothing we can do about this. It's just the reality of our human bias. So use it to your advantage and scale appropriately so that you're making, the EQ moves that you want to make and not what looks good. So there you have it, guys. Super unique little thing that I was thinking of yesterday while I was mixing. I realized I changed my scale. Like I said, I start on 6, I believe, by default, and I changed it to 12 or 30, and I was like, wow, it looks like I'm doing nothing. And I was thinking back how I used to use 30, and I would make huge cuts, and I was like, now my mixes sound better because I'm not being as drastic with my EQ, and it might be partially due to how I changed the scaling by default. But anyways, guys, I just wanted to give you something unique that a lot of people, I've never heard anyone mention this. There's a million videos on what's a compressor do. So I try to give you the unique stuff so you can actually get something that you haven't heard a million times. So if you appreciate that and you feel like I gave you something unique, give me a comment, give me a subscribe, give me a like. Who knows, man? I appreciate it. If not, no worries. I'll see y'all tomorrow, man. Inswain with Inswain Audio. Peace.